Hey guys, welcome to the JavaScript in one video. I'm Light and I'll be your guide, and today we're going to split the video up into two sections. The first is going to show you the syntax of JavaScript. This is like learning the alphabet and learning how to write like really basic sentences and paragraphs. And then once we learn that, the basic syntax to JavaScript, we're going to go to the JavaScript applications, like what you actually use JavaScript for. So you can think of it like learning the basic alphabet and learning basic sentence structure, and then transitioning to writing stories or poems or something like that. So without further ado, let's get started. We learned how to put elements on the web page and how to style them. Now we need to learn how to add some functionality to our site, and that's where JavaScript comes in. So JavaScript, unlike CSS and HTML, it's an actual coding language, so it adds logic to code. And with that, I know it sounds really weird, it adds logic to code, but what that means is that you can have like user interaction where if one thing does one thing, then something happens. So the website chooses what to do based on what you write. And it's used basically for DOM manipulation, AJAX. And if I explained it to you right now, you wouldn't really understand it, but I'll explain it later. So since it's hard to explain DOM manipulation and AJAX without knowing the syntax of JavaScript first, we're going to learn the syntax in this video. And then in the next video, we'll learn about the DOM manipulation and AJAX, which are the applications of JavaScript. So let's code. Let's learn about the syntax. JavaScript. Now remember, JavaScript is used to add functionality to HTML. So kind of like how you can have style tags in CSS with CSS. For JavaScript, you can have script tags, and you can write your JavaScript inside these script tags. You can do it that way, or you can add script tags with the source attribute, and in there you can link a file, so index.js. So that's how you link the HTML and the JS file. So let's go over the syntax. So coding, it's kind of weird. It's like math with words and real things. It's really weird at first, but you'll get used to it, and it's pretty intuitive. So you can declare variables just like in math class, like A, B, C, D. So we're declaring a changeable var equal to this little string of text. So let's a variable. That means let use one of these other const or let for a variable. You can also use var, but you typically don't use var. You use let or const. And use let for variables that you want to change, and use const for constants that you don't want to change. So changeable, not changeable. Now there's a few different types of data that you can assign to variables. You can use the strings of text, and you can use those single quotation marks, double quotes, backticks. Those all work. You can use numbers. You can use booleans, which means either true or false. You can have these arrays, which it's just like a matrix of stuff almost. You can also use objects. These are one kind of object. So cat equals meow, dog equal object literals equals bark. So it's when you have the object literals, it's when you have a key and a value. So cat to meow, dog to bark. You can also have undefined variables when the variable it's not set to anything. There's no value to it. It's not set to anything. and it's called undefined. You can do it two ways, either by not setting it or setting it equal to undefined, so it's not set. And then you have this null data type, which a lot of people get undefined and null confused. Null means nothing, so it has a value, but it's nothing. Undefined is where there's no value. So let's get into some basic logic in JavaScript. You can use these things called if-else statements, where you have the if, and then parentheses, and then a condition, and then you have these brackets, and you could get to say what you want based on that condition. So if number, we declared number up here equal to 44. So if number, the triple equal sign, use the triple equal sign to check the type and the value. If we use the double equal sign, then this would technically be true because it only checks the value, doesn't check the type. And if you use a single equal sign, it's the same as setting it equal to a new value. So you want to use the triple equal sign usually. So if number equals to 44, number plus plus. So that just means add 1. You can also do minus minus to subtract 1. Else if, so if that's not true, although it is true, if that's not true, and instead it equals to 24, which it doesn't, then we can set the number to this. Or else, if it's neither of these two, we do this on it. Now, if you run the if statement, since it's equal to 44, it'll just be the number. It won't do any of these other things. But if it wasn't, it might do any of these two. You can add as many else ifs as you want, but there can only be one if and one else. Yeah. Okay, switch statements. It's another kind of logic thing. Condition. Yeah. We're putting the number in here into the switch statement, and it's checking the value of the number. So if number is 44, then we want to set it to 2, and then we want to get out of the switch statement. If number is 45, we want to set it to 2, and then we can break out. In default, if like neither of these is correct, then this is like the default thing that happens. Now we've went over some basic logic. Let's go over loops. So for loops, you use for loops when you want like a set number of times it runs, like a specific 10 times, 19 times, or whatever, or you want to like go over like a list, and you have the for thing, and you have these parentheses, and you set a variable, your starting variable. So we're setting a starting variable of I to 0. So we start at 0, and then we go until I is we go while I is less than 10. So as soon as I hits 11, then it's going to stop. So this tells you when to go, when to stop, this is when to start. And then this is the step. So I plus plus, you're going by 1 each time, because I plus plus means add 1. So we're adding 2 to I every time we go through, so it'll keep on going until it gets to 11. Now there's also while loops, which are kind of like for loops, but they're simpler. So while j, we set j to 0. J is less than or equal to 10. So while it's less than or equal to 10. So once it hits 10 or 11, it's going to stop. It's going to stop at 10 actually, but it's not going to go into 11. So we're setting text, number is, and then the j value, and we're adding j each time, and then we're logging it. We'll see this a lot in the future. We're logging it to the browser. We'll get into that when we learn about DOM manipulation in AJAX. So functions, when you want to repeat code like a bunch of times, you can use a function. We're calling this function add, and it takes in num1 and num2. You don't need these, but these are like if you want to pass in values. And it returns num1 plus num2. So it adds these two together, and then the value of the function is this statement here. That's what the return means. That means set like the value of this function to this thing here. Then subtract. This is called an arrow function. It's another way of writing a function. You could set it like as a variable, so const subtract equals, then this lines up with this, and then you have an arrow. You'll see this a lot nowadays in modern JavaScript with the arrow functions. And then to use functions, we wrote the functions, we need to call them. So we can call subtract, and then we have the things here, and we pass in num1 and num2, so 4 and 2. So the result of this subtract thing here will be 2, because it subtracts num1 from num2. Now, here I also did another thing. We can pass in functions to functions. So add 4 plus 5, that's 9. It'll be 9 in here, and then it'll subtract 4 from 9. So this will give us 5. Okay, let's move on to classes now. And classes confuse a lot of people. If you've coded in another language besides JavaScript, JavaScript actually doesn't have classes. This is actually like a syntactic sugar. JavaScript uses prototypes, but I'm going to teach you classes just because it's easier to wrap your head around. So a class, it's just a folder filled with a bunch of functions and variables. However, the variables are called attributes, and the functions are called methods. So we created this little rmath class, so we can do some math, with pi equals to that, and Euler's number equal to that. And we added some methods down here. So that's classes. You have your oh, notice how you also don't have to like write function. You don't have to do that in inside classes. So in order to use a class, you have to instantiate it, where you do const math instance equals new rmath. So you kind of like this, you have to kind of call it, but you instantiate it. That's what you do. So this is how you instantiate it, with the new keyword, new class name, and you set it to a variable. So math instance, or instance of the class, dot Euler, so that'll return this value, and then we can also use it to add. So math instance dot add 1 plus 2, and that'll give us 3. Now down here I have another function. It has this thing called a constructor. If you noticed in functions, you can pass in these things into the parameters. Now classes usually don't have that, so you need a constructor to do that. So in this, where you can pass in a type of plane, like a F-22 Raptor or something like that, or a Boeing. Yeah, you can pass that into the class in the instances you put here, and that sets the type. So this dot plane, this keyword, it refers to the thing in the class. So if there's like a plane out here, a plane variable, it'll ignore that. Whenever you're using variables inside classes, you need the this keyword. And you can get the type by using this function. You can set it using this function. And then you can also inherit from functions. So a jet, it's a type of plane. So jet extends plane. It takes the stuff from plane. Here's the tour stuff. And inside the constructor, you have to pass in which things you want from the plane constructor, and then you call super with the same stuff in here, super, to get all the stuff inside the plane function. So super inside this constructor gets all the values that it's extending from. And there's another method there. Okay, so really the big class, I know we created rmath up here, but JavaScript comes with a math class like default, So you can also do math.py. You can round numbers, math.random. This is one of JavaScript's default classes. There's also a date class. And then we'll get into the document in the window. Objects or classes. Objects in the future. So going back up to here, the data types, you can do all sorts of things to the data types. And I have these links if you want to check them out. But the string, you can get the length of the string. That'll be like 23, I think. Oh yeah, you can combine strings and variables using these backticks. These are backticks, not quotations. Then you have this money to include the variable in there with strings. And then I listed some. You can find the index of k inside here. It'll tell you where it is in there. And I listed some more different functions you can use on strings or methods right here. This is a great resource for learning JavaScript if you want to check out some more functions. Same thing with the numbers. This turns this string into a number. I know this looks like a number, but it's actually a string of text. So it parses it into an integer. And then arrays, you can sort it from array.sort. We're calling the sort method or function on this array, and it sorts it from least or alphabetically. And then the 0 arrays start from 0. So here we're getting the 0th value. So it would be running, but since we're calling sort first, it would be biking, since we're going to rearrange it alphabetically. But this gets the first value in arrays, 0. 1 would get the middle one, 2 would get the last one. Do that 0. And you can check out more of the different methods and functions for the arrays and objects. So there we go. There's just a basic overview of the syntax. In the next video, we'll talk about the DOM manipulation AJAX stuff to really understand the applications of JavaScript. You don't have to memorize all of this, just understand the principles, understand what's going on. You'll learn what all of these are just by practicing. So just understand the concepts, and you got this. Nice job. Let's go over the applications of JavaScript. So I'm going to take this folder, this applications folder, and drag it to my VS Code editor. You can find the same code on the GitHub page. I'll link it in the description. And there's 3 different folders here. You can create like right-click, new folder, or just do new folder. Create files too. So let's open this basic site with live server just to see some things you can do. You can do this this hamburger menu. You can do modals. Anything that includes functionality you can do with JavaScript. With CSS, it's just kind of like art. It's just the stuff on the page. But with JavaScript, you get to add the functionality. So let's code some stuff. The first thing I want to do is go to this thing that says DOM. I'll open this in live server, and we're going to learn how to do this. Add little items to the list. Okay, let's figure out how this works. So DOM, what does DOM mean? DOM stands for Document Object Model, and it's just JavaScript's interpretation of your HTML. So you can access different parts of the DOM or the HTML file and change it to your liking. So index.js. So when you want to do DOM manipulation, what you want to do is select elements, get the HTML elements, and then do something to it with this thing called an event listener. So up here, we create variables like list and background button. So I'll show you how to do that. So we'll do const, we'll make it a constant, and we'll call this list input. We already have it up here, but we'll create it again. List input equals document. This is the DOM object, document dot query selector. So we're going to the document and we're selecting an HTML element. So list input, so it has an ID of list input, so I'll copy that, and then we'll put a hash there. If it were a class, I'd do a dot. If it were just a tag, I'd do like a P or an A or an IMG. But since it's the class, or not the class, the ID, we do a hash. And this will grab the list input from the DOM. Cool. So as you can see, we didn't just use getElement by ID or query selector. We also use getElement by ID, which is like query selector, but it finds an ID. So we got all of our stuff. Now let's see what we can do with it. So first, let's go over this part of code that does that. Now here I set a variable called background to false. So it's a Boolean. I created a variable and we added an event listener. It's a method on this background button object. So we got the background button here, right here from the DOM, and we're going to add an event listener that says click. So when you click on it, that's going to trigger the event. So add event listener. It takes in two things. It takes in the event, which is a click, and then it takes in a function. So a function of what you want to do once the event happens, so once it's clicked. So here's an arrow function. It looks kind of weird. We're used to this. We're used to this with arrow functions. However, this is an anonymous function, so it doesn't have a name. It doesn't have this part. It doesn't have a name. It's an anonymous function. Or this is another anonymous function. So functions without names. And when using event listener, you can pass the E or event thing in there. It'll return the event to the thing. So once we click on this, we're changing the background from whatever it is to not whatever it is. So it'll go from false to true, and then if it's false, it'll go back to true. Now if we set it to like true, then we wouldn't be able to toggle back and forth. It would be super annoying, so we have to set it to not background, so you can toggle it and go from this color to white. So we check what the variable for background is, and if it's equal to true, we do document.body. So we go and get the body, document.body, .style, and you can change styles with JavaScript, .style, and then the name of the CSS that we want to change. We want to change the background color. So we're changing it to that if it's true. Else, if it's not true, we want to set it to white. So we're just changing it from true and false. That's what we're doing. Now you might want to know why we're using triple equals here. It's kind of weird. So in JavaScript, equals, it assigns this to this. So we don't want to assign it, we want to compare it. Double equals, it compares the value. So 4, this is technically true because 4 equals 4. The triple equals, it compares the type, and since this 4 is a number and this 4 is a string, this would be false since it compares the value of 4 and then the type, which is a string, a number, and a string, and those don't match. However, double equal sign, this would be true because it only compares the value. Okay, so I hope you understand this basic part. So let's go here. Now here we set another variable and we didn't set it to anything, so it's undefined. So let text. We added another event listener to this list input that we got from the DOM. We got right here. So it's this element. And once we put something into the input, it sets the text, this variable text, to e.target.value. So e.target.value, it's just whatever we type into here. That's it. So we add an event listener to the button too, this button, and when it's clicked, we want to create an li tag, document.createElement li, and we're calling it list item. And then we want to set the text inside text content inside the list item text content equal to the text from the input. And then list.append child list item. So we want to add this list thing we created to the list. So like that. And I hope you understand the concepts. We'll move on to AJAX next. Oh, one last thing, you can also list remove. You can also remove elements too. You don't just have to append. You can remove, do all sorts of different things. So there's DOM manipulation, and it's a lot simpler than it seems. It's just you're changing your HTML elements with JavaScript. Now, AJAX. What is AJAX? Let's open this up in Live Server. Oh yeah. Let's go over this really quick. So we want to link the index.html and the index.js. So script. Type in script in your HTML at the bottom in the body. And then let's do that. In src, what's the file we want? And we're going to do ./index.html. Now this has to do, this ./ it means the folder we're in. We'll create a new folder called foo, just called foo, index2.js. What if we wanted to go here? Well, / our current directory /foo /index2.js. What if we want to go backwards? .. That lets us go backwards. So ... makes us go back a folder, but we just want to do / index. I'll delete this folder. Cool. So I'm opening this, and you'll see this really crazy stuff. Let's go to this site here, JSON placeholder, and we're using the to-dos. So they give you the code right here. This is something called a promise. So once it does this fetch, then you do something else to it, then then you do something else to it. That's what promises are. At the end, usually you have a catch with error there if anything goes wrong. You usually just console.log error. So those are promises. You don't really need to know those right now because there's a new way to do this called async await. So AJAX, what's AJAX? AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript in XML, and it's to get data from APIs or your backend or whatever. This is really important because this is how the front end communicates with the backend through AJAX, or asynchronous JavaScript. So synchronous, it does everything one thing at a time in chronological order. Asynchronous, since we don't know how long it's going to take to get all this stuff, we don't we don't want to do everything synchronously. We want things to kind of happen at different speeds and stuff. So if this fails, then our entire code doesn't fail. So what are we doing? To do async calls, you set the function to async. Say it's an async function, this here. And also do async hello. Whatever. Just use the arrow functions like this, but you need to say it's an async. And then const response, we're setting response to await, and then we're going to this URL and getting the stuff from here. So await, we need to use await so it knows to make it async. So after this, you want to take this stuff it fetches from here, this stuff, and you want to turn it into JSON. And this is actually JSON. JSON that's just like a JavaScript objects and arrays. That's it. It's just data. And this is JSON right here. So you want to take the response, which isn't going to be in JSON, and turn it into JSON like this. And then after that, I'll show you what we got. So it says this, so const.log data, so data, it's this JSON, data 0, so this is the first element, and then the title, so we're getting this title. So yeah, you can do that. Let's see what would happen if we just do data. We got this huge array, which is this array. So async is really important because it's how you're going to communicate with your backend and stuff when you use React. And yeah, so instead of this fetch to-dos, it'll be like fetch, or you'll use this library called Axios /, which is like your root thing. It's kind of like if we just went here to just /, yeah. Alright, so I hope you understand. Oh, last thing, try catch. So I set this function here, and we use the function in this try catch. So try to do this function. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, we're just gonna console.log error. So put the error in the console. Okay, I hope you understand DOM manipulation and AJAX, just the very basics. Feel free to try some of this out on your own. Create your own stuff. We're going to get to React and some exciting things next. Nice job.